Good day, student. This is a presentation that will help you or guide you on how to answer the ACS Biology 1-1. This is basically something that will be very useful to you in a sense that it will guide you on how to answer the assignments. Now, this presentation was compiled based on the learning objective that are required for you to know. So the content is based on the learning objective, and you also have this learning objective clearly explained in your modules, which is available to you. So please, I urge you to listen very careful to the presentation, especially paying particular attention to the keywords or verbs that are used when asking questions. These verbs are also similar to they are similar to questions that appears in your examination. Great. This presentation is for ACS, DES Biology 1-1. Great. As my name is there, as it's available there, Ms. Shilongo. Let's now look at biology. Different biology questions require one to answer by providing facts to that specific question. Even though you have to sometimes provide your own understanding, such understanding is based on fact, because biology is a scientific subject. It's a science subject, it's based on facts. Now, always pay attention to the keywords asked in the question. I urge you to underline such keyword. Now, the keywords that are mostly in any questions in your assignments or examination are such as, we have defined very simple keywords: define, identify, differentiate, describe, outline, discuss, explain, and suggest, just to mention a few. I will go in details on each of those keywords that are used when we ask questions and what is expected from you. Now, let's look at define, identify, and state questions. What do I mean by this? This is the question that starts with identify. So the question can ask you, for example, to identify a certain structure, a certain part of a cell. A question is asking you to define or state. Now, this question require you to provide only information that you recall. Recording of information, very simple questions which require simple answer, and usually the marks range from 1 to 2. Especially for the identification can be 1. The state something can be also 1. Or if they ask you to state, let's say for example, they ask you to state 2 phyla of animals. Then in that case, you are required to provide 2 answers, very simple, short answers. Now, let's quickly look at this terminology and let's look at what is expected from you. Defining. Defining basically means you need to give a brief meaning of something. Give a meaning of what is a term, the term means. In biology, we have a lot of terminology. For example, when you look at the first chapter, we have the characteristic of living organisms. In those characteristics of living organisms, there are 7. And such characteristics, you need to know their meaning. Going to another things like diffusion, osmosis, active transport, facilitated diffusion, you also need to know their meaning of those terms. So another example that I can also give, we also have things like when we are talking about the phylum. What is a phylum? What are the species? What are the genus? What does binomial system means? So in biology, there are many terminology. So, and you need to know their meaning. So in short, when the question asks you to define a terminology, a certain term, literally you are required to give a brief meaning of something. You need to be careful now. You have to look at the marks allocated to that specific questions. Now, let's say they ask you define the term respiration, and they give you 1 mark. Basically, you only have to say, as you can see on the screen there, respiration is the releasing of energy inside the living cells. That worth only 1 mark. But let's say they ask you to define osmosis. Excuse me. Osmosis, then, you must therefore, looking at the definition of osmosis or the meaning of osmosis, it's very long. You must give a definition. For example, osmosis is a passage of molecules or particles from a higher water potential to a lower water potential through a partially permeable membrane. Look at the length of that terminology. It's long, and usually they give you 2 to 3 marks. But again, what is your focus? Your focus is on the meaning of the term osmosis. It can also be about nutrition, many terminology in biology. It can also be about trophic. It can be about photosynthesis, the meaning of the word photosynthesis. It can be about translocation. It can be about let's say, for example, when we look at asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, it can be about ovulation, it can be about mutation. So those are some of the common terms that you are expected perhaps to be asked on their meaning. Let's move on to the other keywords that is commonly used when we ask questions. Identify. Biology is one of those subjects that you must have a diagram. Now, I will provide you, let's say for example, the assignment has a diagram. Then I can put labels on that diagram. Then I can ask you to identify the structure labeled X or the structure labeled Y, whatever it is the case. But identify means you need to name or list that structure as you can see on the diagram. To identify is to name or list a feature as indicated on the diagram. Great. Let's move on to the next one. So going back, let me quickly just go back again to identify. When it comes to identify, it's also one of this, you just recall either on a cell where you recall the structure either as a cell membrane or a nucleus, or when it comes to the alimental canal where you can ask to identify an organ, or when it comes to a blood vessels where you can identify the part of that blood vessels. So to be short, there is just you identify, you name or list the features as indicated on the diagram. Great. Let's move on to the next keyword which is used in question. State or list. State 3 types of respiration. Let's say, for example, and take note, those are your aerobic and anaerobic. State, it's similar to the word list. List or state, so you are basically listing. You are providing, you are giving the name or the facts or object in a certain order. Let's say, for example, list the level of organization. This means, for example, you must give the kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, the family, the genus, and species. So listing, you are giving a list of certain name or certain fact or certain object. Again, this question require usually, depending on what, if they say state A type of respiration, that is 1 mark. State 2 type of respiration, then you know that is 2 marks. So you need also to pay attention to state what? What is it that is stated? Is it types or a type? Good. Let's look at some of the describe, discuss, and outline question. In this case, you are expected to be brief, but I will clearly indicate you. When it comes to describe, in biology we have graphs, and we usually ask you to describe the result that is shown on that graph. So describing, you are telling us what is going on that graph. Is there an increase or a decrease? What is going on? So describing, you must tell us what is going on. What do you see on that graph? Is there an increase or a decrease? And mention clear fact. Let's say, for example, the experiment is about photosynthesis, and the amount, photosynthesis and the temperature. Now you must indicate what is the influence of temperature on photosynthesis? Does it mean, based on the graph, you must look at the graph and use the fact on the graph. Now, does it mean that when the temperature increase, the rate of photosynthesis increase? Or does it mean there is an optimum temperature where the rate of photosynthesis is faster? So please, describing, provide clearly what you see on that graph. The number of factors depend on the marks allocated. Just like for any other questions, the marks that will be given to each and every question is the one that guide you on how much to say, what to say. So the factor, if there are 5 marks, so you must give 5 marks there. No much explanation is needed in describing or discuss or outline question. Focus on what is asking a question, nothing else. For example, if I ask you to discuss the process of photosynthesis, I expect you only to look at photosynthesis. What are the requirements of photosynthesis? Meaning that what are the conditions that should be there for photosynthesis to take place? And also, what are the product of photosynthesis that are produced? So I would like you, if you are discussing about a certain phenomena, it must be about photosynthesis only, nothing else. Similar outline, when you are out, there is outline Whatever it is that you are outlining, again, you are focusing, you are outlining what is asked in that specific questions. Good. Let's move on to explain question. Biology, we don't only want you to recall information, we want you to tell us that specific factor, why it is so. We explaining question. Now let's look at explain why. It's the most common keyword used in the question, biology question. You are required to name 3 facts, for example, and above and thoroughly explain them. So you must, let's say for example, I ask you, the question asks, explain 3 adaptation of arthropods. Let me quickly rephrase that. Explain 3 adaptation of red blood cells to their function. So you are expected to name the fact. Let's say for example, the fact could be there that the red blood cells are biconcave shape. They have a biconcave shape. They have few organelles, meaning that they have few structure. Another factor can also be is that they are small. Now, then we give explanation to why they have a biconcave shape, and also or why they have only few organelles or few structure. Then you must give a reason. For example, when you say the red blood cells have few organelles. The few organelles to give enough space for hemoglobin to carry more oxygen. So you are giving an explanation to the fact. Few organelles, why they have few organelles? To provide more space for the red blood cells to carry enough oxygen. It can also be, for example, what are the features found in the insect which make them to survive on land. Let's say, for example, you can ask, they are small. So the smaller they are, they don't need many more food. And excuse me. And also is that they have wings to fly away from predators. The presence of wing is a fact, and the reasoning of saying to fly away from predator, you are providing a reason. So explaining question, you are giving a clear reason on fact you have provided. In biology, we have a lot of them. They can ask you things like why oxygen is needed in the process of respiration. Then I'm going to rephrase that. Why oxygen is needed during aerobic respiration. Then you clearly state that, give reason, right? Because aerobic respiration can only take place in the presence of oxygen, and also for it to provide, for it to release more energy. So the number of reasons also depend on the marks allocated. If there is only 2 marks, so that means only you are expected to give 1 fact and a reason. If there are 4 marks, you need to give 2 facts. On each of the facts given, you must give a reason to each fact. Fight hard so that you don't go out of the topic. Please, very, very important. If the question is about osmosis, don't talk about diffusion. Don't talk about facilitated diffusion. Don't talk about active transport. If the question if it's on osmosis, focus on the movement of water. And the movement of water is moving from a high water potential to a lower water potential. Your focus should only be on water. liquid there. So you need to fight so hard. Fighting so hard here means when you give effect, give reason for it. As you explain, avoid general or vague statement. Don't give general statement, vague things that are too vague and general is literally means the same there. Now, what I meant there means when it comes to photosynthesis, and you are asked the importance of photosynthesis in plants, for example, your focus should only be on why photosynthesis is important to plant, not to other living organisms. Avoid being general. Therefore, this requires you to read the question very, very carefully. So usually, if you prepare well, if you get enough rest, if you are not scared of the question, usually if you are not scared of the examination, is that is basically means that when you prepare, you are not going to be scared. Therefore, that gives you enough courage to read each and every question carefully so that you can understand and provide specific answers. Now, no listing of answer. Don't just list answers. When you list those, no listing of answer or using bullets. Don't use bullets or bullets. As you can see, these are the bullets there. You don't need to use the bullets or listing the answer. You need to write effect there and provide reason for it. So in biology, there are plenty of questions about explaining. But as I say, please give effect and give a reason, a clear reason to that fact. If you are asked to there are 5 marks, you need to provide 5 marks and a reason. If you only list on an explaining question, you are not going to get marks because the question says explain, meaning that give reason. Because if you only state, that is not an explaining. You are not explaining anything at all. Good. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, in biology, as we say, biology is a science subject. We are also learning the scientific processes skills. The scientific processes skills require you to be able to calculate, require you to estimate and to find. Remember, as a science subject, you are required to carry out practicals. It's a prerequisite for you to carry out practicals. In those practicals, in some cases, you are expected to calculate. Calculate means give a numerical answer from given information. It can be that the question given to you, it can be in a table where they give you the number of bacteria that reproduce in a certain area. So, and they ask you to add the number of those bacteria together or to calculate the number of bacteria in that specific area. So your final answer is expected to be numbers. Calculate means your final answer, give your answer in numbers. Numerical answer there means number. Now, if the unit are required, please provide them. Now, we are also in biology, we magnify the specimen. Those items that we take from plants or from insect, those parts, small part, or we can take them from an animal, our cheek cells from our inside our cheek, inside our mouth, and we view it on a microscope. But when we view it on a microscope, the image is larger, and we are expected to calculate the magnification. So when you calculate the magnification, you are expected the final answer must be in numbers. It must be a numerical, it must be number. And you need to know there must be a unit there. So please, units are very important in biology, just like in any other subject, because it gives us a clue on what it actually. Okay, let's look at estimate. Provide a reasonable projection of numerical gain. Find a general term. Compare, contrast. We compare, use a table format to indicate the similarity and difference of phenomena. Construct to show how things are different. Differentiate, point out clearly the difference. Demonstrate, perform the necessary operation. Show example, for example. Analyze, examine the information in detail to discover the main idea. Look at the relationship, criticize, give reason, judgment, something. For example, you are asked, is it useful to add fluoride to water? You need to criticize it there. Now, suggest, you imply that students are expected to apply the general knowledge to a novel situation. You illustrate by giving example or making drawing. Deduce, use the information to provide. Deduce means come to conclusion. Evaluate, judge, judge that specific phenomena. Now, let's look at the subject content in our ACSC biology. The questions there in your assignment come from this topic: diffusion, osmosis in plants and animal, the cnidarian, the arthropod, cell structure, nutrition in human, plant nutrition, transport in human beings, evaluate human influence on the environment. Now take note. Now this topic, you need now to carefully look at what is the question asking you about this topic. What is it? Is it to define? Is it to discuss? Is it to identify? What is it? You now know what is to identify. You know now what is to differentiate. Please, now you just need to go to your modules. The answer are there in your modules. Then you are able to provide factors, fact. Those are the topics that are assessed. I am not going to tell you the questions, but at least you have a guide on what is in the assignment. And this topic, the information are in your books. You have seen the keywords. Please, student, look at the meaning of them. Look at the allocation of marks. And I know you can do it. Now, please, again, I urge students to try to complete your assignment on time. Try to complete your assignment on time, and best wishes, you can do it. Just pay more attention and please plan your time effectively. Now, for further information, please, you can email me at the email indicated there, hongerajoseph@gmail.com. Good luck and thank you for listening to me.